Welcome to another episode of CrafterCast, where we focus on specific topics related to modern content management for digital experience applications. Today, we're talking about Git and why it's a better content repository than databases, which are typically used by content management systems. My name is Mike Vertal, and with me today is Russ Danner. So Russ, let's start today by first talking about why Git is a better content repository.
Sure. So let's start with maybe some of the issues with databases, right? People struggle with versioning in databases. In the database system, there's no natural versioning. So you typically end up with versions that are individual files or at best like clumps of files. But in a content management space, you really want to be able to version all of your work together, right? People want to be able to see what was the state of my site on this day? What was the state of my site on that day? Not just sites, but any digital experience. And they want to be able to roll back whole sets of work. And that just doesn't exist in the database world. But it does exist in Git, right? We can create branches. We can do a bunch of work in that branch, and we can commit all of that work as one kind of atomic set. And then we can move that atomic set around, and we can do things like revert. So people who are looking for that kind of functionality have kind of gravitated towards, hey, there's already a system that does this, and that's version control systems, and in this case, Git that does that. So versioning is a lot better, and it's much better than databases. Another issue that people have with databases in the content management space is multiple environments, right? If I've got content stored in production, then how do I get that content down to lower environments? Well, I could write a lot of complicated scripts to kind of try to detect changes in the database and then move those down. But that's a real difficult task. And there's a lot of questions about when does it happen and what do I do with conflicts and things like that. So as a result, what do people do? They take the simple route. They just export the data from production and import it into the lower environment, which again requires you to have content freezes. You've got to kick the people out when you take the export from the higher environment. And then when you do the import, you've got to kick people out of the lower environment. And then you overwrite everything that they have. So it creates issues, it creates friction between groups, and it also clobbers content that exists.
It's a major bottleneck, right?
Yeah, it's a major
workflows for content producers, content authors, publishers, and developers at the same time.
By contrast, though, Git just naturally does this, right? I can create a relationship between two environments, two different repositories, right? So that because Git is a distributed repository, I can say that this site in production and this site in QA are the same repository at different points in time in their history. And if I want to get content from production down to QA, then it's just simple, Git pull. And Git is able to go to production and say, hey, what's changed up there? And then merge that into my history. Even if I have changes in QA, because I've been doing some testing, I can then merge my changes into that QA environment. So that's amazing, right? That there alone is a huge, huge win. And if you start to think about just that operation of getting content from a higher environment down to a lower environment to basically help the QA team support their process, well, what are we talking about? We're talking about development. We're talking about the whole innovation release process. And that's what we call dev content ops. And so really, Git is more powerful than databases because it helps support the whole automation and continuous integration and continuous deployment, which we call dev content ops, because it's not just development and operations anymore. We've added content authors, so it's dev content ops.
Yeah, I like to call it CI/CD CP for continuous publishing at the same time with the CI and CD for the software features.
Yeah, so Git as a repository, because of these reasons, has been really gaining a lot of attention from different types of CMSs over the last couple of years, right? Because everybody wants to solve this kind of efficiency problem, do a lot more automation, support a lot more innovation across a lot of different channels. So it seems to be an ideal type of repository.
Yeah, so we've seen many simpler CMSs that use Git or GitHub. GitHub itself has pages, right? They have their own kind of CMS service for managing static content. So let's talk about kind of the range of content management use cases when you're using Git as the underlying repository.
Yeah, I think the majority of systems that use Git are kind of like static sites, very simple content, simple sites, let's say blog sites, brochureware websites, and so on. And they are able to use static site generation. And so that's the most common thing you see, right? Hey, edit this simple markdown, right? Save it. That fires a Git hook, or you make a pull request. When that pull request is approved, okay, now you fire off a static site generation process and then throw those generated pages in an S3 bucket or something, and that's deployment. So that's a good example of a very popular kind of approach today. That's almost what you see in the Jamstack space. That's what a lot of folks advocate for there. You can extend that, and you'll see with Crafter that we do, we do build on that idea quite a bit. But another approach that we see is just people really managing traditional HTML assets, CSS, JavaScript, and so on in the Git repository, and then deploying it without a build process.
So let's now talk about how Crafter is different from most other Git-based CMSs. We've integrated Git into Crafter, the authoring experience, Crafter Studio, and all the tools for the authors. How do we integrate Git into that, and how do we leverage Git to its fullest extent for a wide variety of use cases, not just these static sites that many of these other CMSs use it for?
Yeah, well, one major difference is that we use Git itself under Crafter. So it's our own Git repository. A lot of other content management systems are connected directly to something like GitHub or Bitbucket or GitLab or Git XYZ. What we do is we have our own Git repository, and then we integrate as an upstream or some other remote repository. We can integrate with GitLab or Bitbucket or GitHub or what have you. So they're just considered a remote for us. And that's so that we can again then link into whatever development process you have, whatever development tools you have, and so on. But Git is fundamental to Crafter. Another difference is that we store our content as XML. And we just talked about how some CMSs store static HTML, some CMSs store Markdown, and so on. We store our content as XML without any presentation. So we know individual strings of copy and metadata and images and so on. And then we are using Crafter Engine, which is our delivery component, to render that content, okay? And Crafter Engine is a separate component from authoring. So you have the authoring system, and it sits on top of Git as a repository, and we publish content to Crafter Engine, which is just the files, the XML files, the static assets, and so on. And Crafter Engine then takes that content, merges it, and can then do dynamic things with it. So CrafterCMS is a dynamic CMS on top of it.
And the APIs on top of Crafter Engine that we expose to the developers include JSON as well as other templating interfaces as well, right?
That's right. Yeah. And also important to point out here is that unlike a lot of other CMSs that use Git and where authors are managing, say, Markdown, so they have to be a little bit technical to be able to go in there and make the right markup and so on. We're serving sites that authors are traditional business user type authors on all kinds of digital experiences at really large scale in some cases. And so we provide tooling that is for non-technical people. It's traditional style in-context editing, drag and drop, and so on. So it's very simple editing. You don't need to know anything about Git, but you get all the benefits of it behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's a common question we get or concern. People new to Crafter when they first learn about it and hear about Git as the repository is, do my content editors need to learn Git or interact with Git?
Yeah, absolutely not, right?
Right. Yeah, they have no idea what's underneath the covers. They get a rich set of authoring, editing, publishing tools to create content, to create experiences and publish it out. And Git takes care of all the versioning and workflow details underneath the covers for them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess maybe it'd be helpful to kind of go over some of the use cases that people see value in when they encounter a CrafterCMS. So first is that versioning. It's like a time machine, right? So every change you make, you can get access to that change, but you can get access to that change in context of everything else. It's really powerful because it allows you to, for example, support things like an audit. What did this experience say, or What was it showing on this particular day? There's no need to create PDFs or create snapshots of things or refer to a backup. You can go and just raise that experience up and hand it off to a legal team and say, go ahead and audit it. That's what it was. That's the state of the universe at that moment in time. It's also useful for editorial teams who maybe want to know what the site was at that time. Another big use case on the authoring side is redesigns, right? So, or large changes, not just redesigns, but maybe large changes that you're making to content or migrations and so on. So you can use branching to keep track of the ongoing work that's in production, and you can make your work happen in a branch so that if your work is going to take, let's say, a week or 2 weeks or whatever, you can continue to pull the production content into your branch as you go. What does that mean? That means you don't have to double publish so that you stay up to date, right? So that really makes that use case much easier. And then the last use case is on the development side, which is dev content ops, right? And that's a huge use case. I mean, everybody is looking to improve the speed of their innovation, and the Git-based repositories is the main facilitator of that, really.
Yep. All right, that's great. I think that's a good summary of why Git is a better repository for content and for a content management system than the traditional approach of databases. So let's put a wrap on this episode. Thanks everybody for watching. If you found this useful, hit the like button and share it with your friends and colleagues. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and so you don't miss any future episodes. And feel free to comment below on any topics you'd love to hear us talk about, or hit us up over at CrafterCMS.com. Thanks for watching and have a great day.